In today's episode, we will talk about the freaking intermediate plateau. 2 language learning techniques that will help you go from intermediate to advanced, and how to implement these techniques in 3 simple steps. Welcome back. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining. My name is Mari, and I make language-related videos every single week. I put a lot of effort on it, so if you can hit a like, it will mean the world to me. It will really make me happier. So thank you in advance. Today we have a very loaded but interesting content, so bear with me as I go through all of this. This episode will be especially helpful if you're an intermediate learner. However, you can start implementing all of these techniques whenever you start feeling comfortable with them. Let's first start with the intermediate plateau. What happens when you reach the intermediate plateau? When you begin learning a language at the beginning, you improve really fast. You go from zero knowledge to being able to understand and produce basic vocab and structure in a few months. But then there comes a moment when you can talk about many topics, but you lack vocabulary and you make constant grammatical mistakes. I know this to be true. I've been in the intermediate plateau myself since forever with Dutch, and I'm finally seeing my way out. However, the intermediate plateau, it's very long. I love an analogy that Steve Kaufman, a very popular polyglot on internet, has, and he says it's like a hockey stick but upside down. It's very easy to climb it up, but then the plateau, it's very long, and you almost feel like you're not making progress, but you are. It's just at a different pace. But how to know if you have hit a plateau? How to recognize this moment? Firstly, you feel frustrated. You feel like you're not progressing. You can understand more than you can produce. This happens a lot. You struggle to find words. You are constantly doubting your grammar. You still translate in your head every now and then. So especially feeling frustrated and feeling like you're not progressing, these are the very first signs of having hit a plateau. While your problems are technical, what I advise you to do is to work on your confidence and your patience first. You probably don't want to hear this, but from now on, it will take time to move forward. Just trust the process. And the process might be long, but it doesn't have to be boring. In fact, I'm going to tell you how we're going to make it way more fun. Let's talk about what we can do about it. And I'm going to talk here about 2 techniques. The first one is content integrated learning, and the second one is immersion, partial immersion or artificial immersion. Okay, we're going to start with immersion. Immersion is a language learning technique that refers to being surrounded by the language 24/7. You get this opportunity when you travel abroad, live abroad, or attend an immersive program. But what I really want to talk to you about is partial or artificial immersion, and that is when you surround yourself with the language at home. It isn't as constant, but it still can be very effective. Now, I like to connect this idea of partial immersion with another concept that I have used to teach my students and that my teachers used with me when I attended bilingual school. And it is CLIL. And it basically means that you will learn a language through a subject. For example, in school we will have history lessons in English. We will learn English through the stories, through the experience, and not through vocab or grammar. It is mostly used by teachers at regular school settings. However, I think it can be applied to self-learners as well. The great thing about CLIL is that it is a very straightforward framework that focuses on few main areas, which are content, cognition, communication, and culture or community. So it is very well-rounded and it is very interactive. As you can clearly see, CLIL and partial immersion relate very well. Both intend to surround yourself with the language and learn through experiences. And disadvantages of these techniques. One clear benefit is that it is fun and enjoyable because you are focusing on something that you find interesting. It is also very intense and it helps with accuracy and it helps you to connect deeper with the culture. Disadvantages are that it is time consuming, it is hard to keep track of your progress, and it's not always possible if you study a minority language or a less studied language. So basically what you want to do with these techniques is to mix your hobbies, mix your interests, and combine them with language learning. So creating experiences for yourself that you find interesting. Different content to learn languages with these techniques. You want to find content so you can surround yourself by it at home, right? The first one is my favorite, which is video games. Playing games in your target language as an intermediate learner will put your knowledge to a test. It is an immersive and dynamic experience. You can interact with the characters or other players and have to make decisions within the game that will determine whether you do good or not. And text-based games like The Sims or multiplayer games like VRChats can be really, really helpful. Second thing you can do is watching movies or TV shows without subtitles. This is obvious. It is in itself an immersive experience and one in which you can use visuals to help you understand better each situation. Online courses. This is very interesting. You can learn about a subject of your interest in your target language. That can be incredibly helpful. For example, following a knitting course for beginners in Dutch will be really helpful for me at this moment. It's a very, very implicit application of CLIL. You can either pay for a course or do your own research using YouTube and Google. Another way is to go to language exchanges on a regular basis or to hire tutors and meet with them on a regular basis. It can be very helpful, but you have to try to come up with different topics and make the conversations as dynamic and as interesting as possible. Reading can also be a super immersive technique. And one of my favorite things to do is reading literature in my target language. It is not only super helpful to get in contact with cultural aspects, it is also surprisingly good for your grammar. Now, the classic immersion technique is to have a podcast or radio in the background, just as you're probably doing right now. Listening to podcasts made by native speakers is exactly what you need to master those listening skills. Now, the next thing is taking a challenge. One with an active community will be ideal. Taking part and getting corrections will be super helpful. A language-specific challenge can be exactly what you need to move forward. And the last but not least is writing a diary in your target language. It is in itself a CLIL activity. You are using language to share the contents of your life. As you can see, there are many ways to have partial immersion learning through content without needing to travel or attend an in-person program. But now let's do something about it, because I know you and you're gonna listen to all of this and you're gonna be like, wow, that's cool, but okay, I'm gonna do it later. We're going to create a CLIL plus immersive language learning strategy in 3 simple steps. Let's start with the step number 1. Pick one of the following contents: reading a book, conversations with a tutor or at a language exchange, writing a journal, or listening in the background. And I want you to pick the area that you feel like you need to improve. For example, I'm gonna pick writing a journal because writing, it's always my worst. Now let's move on to step number 2. Pick a time during the week or the day where you're gonna use this technique. For example, you can do it every other day at 7 p.m. You can do it every Monday when you come from home, or you can do it, for example, every time you get in the car. For myself, I'm gonna pick every other day in the morning. How are we gonna learn with it? What's the technique here? As an intermediate learner, you must focus on 2 things that we know are common struggles when you hit a plateau. First is grammar and second is vocab. For vocab, you will need to have a piece of paper or a notebook near you where you can write new words you encounter. You can then make flashcards, use Anki or Quizlet to memorize them, right? So you're gonna make sure that you're writing down all the new words that you find interesting and that you think you're gonna keep using. And for grammar, here's something fun you can do. I want you to check out the grammar, pick a tense, for example, the past perfect, and we're gonna try to recognize it as we read and as we listen. You can take notes or you can simply acknowledge the structure every time you encounter it. This is a way for your brain to do a type of passive sentence mining. However, if you're writing or speaking, try to use that tense in conversation or in writing as much as you can. So use prompts or questions that will lead you to use a tense. That way you can actively practice it. I know this sounds super logical and this exercise is nothing new, but we do not spend enough time getting immersed because I get it, it takes a lot of time. What I want you to do is now to try to stick with this activity for a whole month. Remember that the leap between B2 and C1 is the longest, so be patient. Okay, thank you so much for watching this episode of Mari Polyglot Show. And share this with your language buddies. Maybe you can start a conversation about what we talked today. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.